with a polar vortex in New York. I hope you guys are all warm and comfy and cozy wherever you might be. And there's so much to discuss. This is already turning out to be a great year for Avalanche, and it's already, I think, going to turn out to be a great year for crypto in general. And I'm talking to you, I think, maybe the day after a 3-day marathon workshop that I did with a bunch of people in the Avalanche community about how to move forward and sort of immediate things that we're going to be doing. So I can talk a little bit about that. But I generally want to give you a glimpse of the big things happening in the Avalanche ecosystem. So maybe first I should just jump into the big accomplishments and the big events that took place in the last week or so, or in the last 2 weeks or so. Oh, I haven't had a chance to talk with you all because I was in Davos. And I found out that the proper way to pronounce Davos is not Davos, it's Davos. And I also found out that there's a whole different crowd of people out there. In fact, multiple different crowds. There's the decision makers and the decision maker wannabes. It's the two different crowds that are in Davos. And it was really, really fun. And I think I did a pretty decent job there of introducing some people to the latest, biggest things in blockchains. In particular, I think I tried to get across the main message, which is that blockchains are coming of age. They represent a new way to build systems. And unlike what they might be trained to believe based on Bitcoin and Ethereum, it is now time for networks that facilitate the building of multiple chains. The days of single chain networks are over. So Bitcoin is a single asset, single chain network. Ethereum is a multi-asset, single chain network. And now it's time for multiple chains, multiple assets. And that is represented, I think, in its best form by Avalanche, but also by Cosmos and Polkadot. They too are trying to play a role there. They have different approaches and different technical decisions that make them either slow or put impediments on the path of communication between chains. But we provide the most flexible and also the most performant platform. So anyhow, that was my message. It wasn't so long-winded. Didn't have that much time, but I think I did an okay job of cluing that community in. Get a little bit of rest afterwards. It's really nice out there. And then I got back and did this big workshop. So I'm really, really excited. In the meantime, a crap ton of things have happened in our ecosystem, and I want to talk to you about them. So the very first one that's high on my mind that I've been super jazzed about is Dexolot. They just came on board. And it's an exchange. This is what everybody had been trying to build for some time. And I want to tell you about what they did and what makes it revolutionary from a technical perspective. So this is a DEX. And as far as DEXs go, it's trying to do something that other people tried and could not do, which is provide a highly performant, decentralized, what's called a CLOB, central limit order book. So it's an order book into which you say things like, I want to sell X for 3Y and then, or whatever, 98Y. And then somebody else says, well, I want to sell X. I want to sell X for 99Y. And somebody says, I want to buy for, whatever it is. Well, if they want to buy for 100, then they go and match. If they want to buy for 95, then there's a gap. It's called the spread, etc. So it looks like Binance. It looks like Coinbase. It looks like all the exchanges that you are used to. And if in the old days you ever visited NASDAQ or NYSE, it looks like a regular old exchange, except it is operating on a blockchain, except its operation is auditable in real time, except it's fully transparent. So this is not something that NASDAQ can do. This is not something that New York Stock Exchange can do. It's something we can do in crypto. Those guys have to rely on post-facto auditing. They have to send in regulators. They have to comply with a gazillion things. And these people have to come in after the fact and try to uncover malfeasance. And I have a bunch of stories. I will tell you the simplest one. When I went to the New York Stock Exchange in 1999, so that's a very, very late, in human history. It wasn't that long ago. I went there in 1999 for the first time in my life. And they were talking about their fraud detection. And I don't know if I talked to you about this already, but they were like, well, fraud detection in these markets is so complicated. So we have these alerts whenever any asset suddenly goes up a lot. We alert it. If it goes up by by more than $10, then it's red. If it goes up by somewhere between whatever it is, $5 to $10, then it's orange. And if it's between 0 and 5, it's green, because that they expect it to go up like that. So and then it was like, but then a red alert for a stock that's worth $100 is very different from a red alert for a stock that's worth only $5. So we need a lot of human intervention and a lot of human oversight to try to uncover what's going on, whether or not these price movements are synthetic, they're being caused by market manipulation or something else. And it's just, as somebody who knows, I didn't have to be trained in computer science, as somebody who knows basic math, you just sort of do this facepalm thing as a visitor, and you just go like, why don't you just divide? Just divide one number by the other, then put the colors on. This isn't so hard. I'll do it for you. So anyhow, so we live in this world. We lived in that world for a very long time of incumbents just generally not being able to do their jobs appropriately. I left that place convinced that they weren't doing their jobs on purpose, because they couldn't be that stupid. In any case, fast forward to today, we still have essentially the same people running the same kinds of operations on Wall Street, and they're vertical silos, closed, unauditable. You don't know what's going on. And in fact, it's become the business model for other people to jump in ahead of your orders. Citadel does this all day long, every day. That's just what they do. And now it is time for a better approach. Now we have better approaches. DEXs like Uniswap, DEXs like Trader Joe are great, but they're based on an automated market maker model. So there's a giant pool of liquidity, and the liquidity pool absorbs the trades as they come in and out. Dexolot is operating differently. It's building a traditional club, a traditional central limit order book, where you have the bids and asks, and they're matched against each other when the wants and offers overlap. So, but there is something additionally cool about Dexolot, and I want to talk about that. So this is the first central limit order book, Subnet on Avalanche. It is the most performant. I think prior to this, the only other one I know is DXDY, and they've been looking for a technological solution, and I think they've been generally lost. So they tried some ZK solutions for a while. They found that was highly limiting. I think they were unable to edit their own code because very few people know how to build on the virtual machine that they were using, the Cairo virtual machine. So then they're now looking for whatever it is. DXDY is doing its DXDY thing, and so the world needs an exchange. The world needs exchanges where people have things to sell and people have things to buy, and they come together. And so Dexolot is one of those. Unlike what you might have heard from everybody else, it's based on a different architecture. Dexolot operates on its own subnet, but it's really a multi-chain system. It straddles multiple chains, and there is nothing else like it out there. Let me tell you how it works. So it's an on-chain order book. Yep, you've got your assets on the Avalanche C chain, and so what you will do is you will move your assets into Dexolot, and you will place your orders, and you see a view very similar to what you would see on Binance or Coinbase. And likewise, if you have things to buy, you bring in your cash into Dexolot, and you send your orders to buy things, etc. You buy and sell, etc. So far, so good. But the thing that's unique about Dexolot is that it's based on two chains. Your assets that you have to trade exist and remain forever on the C chain. The trading itself happens on the Dexolot subnet, on a different chain belonging to Dexolot. So that is very, very interesting. Why? Because, first of all, I've never seen anything like it. Second, it's decentralized. It's got all of the blockchain goodness. This is not me selling you some kind of a vision that's going to happen umpteen years from now. There's no layer like whatever the heck vision here. And I'm not here to dazzle you with moon math. This stuff is trustless today. It's not like one of those things that's, that exists on Ethereum, which is all smoke and mirrors. And it's not something that is all a bunch of promises where hopefully someday maybe somebody will deliver. They were about to deliver VRFs, then VDFs, then accumulators, then ZK EVMs, and now da. It's not one of those. This is as it is. It works in a trustless fashion. The assets are on the C chain. They never leave the security of that chain. The assets get created there because people like that chain. The convenience and security of a global shared rendezvous point is hard to sort of overstate. The assets were there to begin with. The AVAX, the Alat coin, and all these other coins that were bridged to Avalanche. So Bitcoin is there, Ethereum is there, whatever else other, Aave coins are there, etc., etc. There's a bunch of, and of course, USDC, USDT, etc., natively exist on the C chain. Those assets are never bridged out. There is never an additional step of moving those out. There's never an additional step of wrapping or rewrapping or unwrapping these assets. They remain on the C chain. Now, then what good is what's the point of the other subnet? Well, the point of the other subnet is to perform the trades in a transparent manner. So perform the trades in an auditable manner, so to ensure the correct operation of the DEX according to its instructions. So we rule out intermediaries. We rule out Sam. We rule out Caroline. We rule out the polycule. There is no additional hands on those assets. And all of the trading happens with only the users directing them. There is nobody else who can come in and take those assets from you and reuse them or repurpose them or build positronic schemes around them and so forth. So that's the setup. And if anybody wants to ensure that indeed Dexolot is doing everything correctly, they can easily open up an Explorer and see what's happening over there. So this combines the best of both. Oh, I should mention a little bit more. Not only is it auditable, transparent, etc., but it's also failure isolated and congestion isolated. So that means that even if the C chain is congested and the fees are sky high and you have to pay like $1.50 or so, instead of 15 cents for your trade on the C chain, if you use Dexolot, your Dexolot trades take place on the Dexolot subnet, and those trades are much, much, much cheaper than they would be on the C chain. If the C chain is congested, the fees go sky high. Well, it doesn't matter. The Dexolot subnet will still operate according to the Dexolot rules. It only executes the Dexolot app, and it is entirely shielded from congestion and load and fee spikes on the main C chain. So I hope you get a glimpse of how cool this is. There is nothing else like it. We did not create a song and dance and try to dazzle you with moon math. We didn't hold carrots out in front of people. We didn't talk about technology that did not exist. Our ecosystem executed and brought you something that just doesn't exist anywhere else. Now, of course, it's going to be really funny. In a few months, other people will wake up to the fact that this is now happening, and they will act like they reinvented this from scratch. They will put a new name on it, whatever it might be called, and it'll be really funny to watch certain people who have a habit of doing this try to ignore the fact that innovation is happening on the Avalanche side. I'm really proud of this. If you haven't checked out Dexolot, check it out. It's in its early days, and the whole thing is just beautiful, in my opinion. Very simple interface, very familiar interface. It works beautifully, exactly as it should. Your keys, your coins, of course. No SAM business, no intermediaries, no custodians in the operation of this DEX. So fantastic setup, and set up in a way that shields all of us from fee spikes and unexpected behaviors, because the execution is happening elsewhere. So execution integrity is guaranteed on the Dexolot subnet, and the assets remain on the C chain. So I'm really thrilled. Take a look. It's really worth, from a technical perspective, it's worth a look. So I'm really proud of the Dexolot team and the hard work that they put into making this. Also, there's something to be said about their background. They started as a regular DApp. They were entirely on the C chain, and And so that's fine. They found some traction there. There were actual Dexolot users. I think their channel is already like 14,000 people. And, I think, I don't know if they're going to do an airdrop or whatnot, but, they're in the stages of collecting users. But on the C chain, they were not shielded from gas fees and fee spikes. And on the C chain, when we had a lot of activity, well, they were suffering in the sense that trades were becoming more expensive. So if it costs 15 cents or more for a trade, or 50 cents or more, then the opportunities for arbitrage start to drop. People start complaining, etc., etc. So we want to keep those fees incredibly low. And this architecture, this dual chain architecture, is exactly the right choice for them, as well as for many applications. And this deployment path of starting out on the C chain and moving to your own subnet is exactly what a lot of applications ought to be doing. Especially demanding ones like DEXs ought to be following this approach. So I'm really proud of what's going on here. And if anybody asks you what's exciting in the blockchain space, dual chain dApps is, I think, the most exciting thing that's happened in 2023 for sure. But I would say in the preceding 12 months, lots and lots of drama happened in the preceding 12 months. I didn't really see all that much that I would say, hey, that's a different architecture for a dApp. The dApp architecture has been kind of boring for the longest time, but this one, I think, takes the cake. It's straddling multiple chains. So really thrilled about this, and can't wait to see other people follow the same path and build even more exciting applications that, again, straddle multiple chains. If any of you are listening and want to build exciting apps, the same can be done with Ethereum and Avalanche. So pick a subnet on Avalanche and dual home with Ethereum and Avalanche. In fact, you could do the same thing with triple chains, right? You go and straddle Ethereum, Avalanche C chain, and your own subnet. The sky's the limit. Okay, so that's one, and I thought that was really exciting. And on the heels of that announcement came the Intane announcement. So Intane chose Avalanche for its institutional subnet. And essentially the idea here is to open up the wheels, the rails for building a platform for multiple trillions of digital assets to be traded in a way that's compliant. And that compliance cannot be had on a single chain. On a single chain, once you digitize the assets, the entire control is lost. You've kind of given everything up to the platform. You've given up everything to the smart contract that you built. But with subnets, you retain some of that control, and you retain a lot of other additional on and off ramp features that you might have to control yourself for your own compliance needs. For example, in the case of Intane, if you want to make sure that the counterparty to every trade is KYC, well, then you need to somehow have some kind of limitation on who can submit a transaction. And so they're building an institutional subnet where those limitations are in place. And the architecture, the right architecture, I've been saying this for I don't know how long, 3 years now. And the right architecture for this is to control and issue your own chain, your own blockchain with your own virtual machine. That's exactly what Intane is doing. And they're taking our subnet EVM and specializing it for their own institutional use. This is going to be a pattern. So Intane is just the first of many to come. I don't know if they are the first institutional one. It's the first of many to come. And there will be a lot of other people following in their footsteps of creating their specialized EVMs, specialized non-EVM, entirely different virtual machines, and many other institutions that come in with their own compliance restrictions imposed on the users and transactions within their own realm, within their own blockchains. I do worry a little bit about the future of sort of Wild West chains, right? So Bitcoin, Ethereum, Avalanche C chain, these are completely whatever it is, they're completely decentralized, completely uncontrolled chains, and they can't really be regulated. But regulators can make it hard to reach these kinds of networks over time. And in the meantime, I mean, that's one thing I worry about what will happen. I would love to retain that energy. I would love to retain that crypto approach that the C chain provides, that Ethereum provides, and that Bitcoin provides. And I would like for us as a community to work with the regulators to sort of address their concerns on the edges of the system, so as to not make it difficult to reach these chains. But when it comes to institutions that are sitting on the sidelines, they want to participate in blockchains. They want the reach. They want the easy collaboration of blockchains, but they can't just jump into one of these Wild West chains because they have compliance needs. Well, this is your pattern. You start your own subnet and you enforce whatever your compliance division says you must enforce. Whatever you would do on whatever, with your assets that you need enforced, you can build into the fabric of a new chain that you start. That's exactly what's happening with Intane. So that's sort of this is sort of a long way of saying the exact same thing. So I'm going to skip this. And this thing is incredibly flexible. We built it because I realized exactly what happens when you build rigid stuff into blockchains. People work around them. If you try to make an asinine play where you try to auction stuff, or you restrict people to use your coin, etc., then life will be incredibly painful. People will work around you. You might be able to sell coins in the short term, but in the long term, you're dead. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of other people who sort of try to force their own coin into processes. Avalanche provides you with an incredibly flexible platform where you can use your own coin for whatever purpose, and the AVAX coin is not shoved down your throat to be used as gas. You can use your own coin for gas. The only requirement to be part of our ecosystem is to stake and validate the P chain. And so that's it's a fairly light requirement that allows, I think that makes it far more conducive for people to participate in the system and to take advantage of the current integrations on the C chain, integrations with exchanges, integrations with the graph, the tie, etc., the various different information utilities on top of that chain. So, and especially with now dual chain architectures, you can straddle, you can maintain your assets on one chain and provide your execution on another. This, I think, is going to be really exciting. Okay, let's take a look at network growth. What's happening on the network growth side? And so now I'm going to go into a rant, and my voice is cracking already, and so that always gets me depressed, because a good rant really requires a good voice, and I wanted to just be able to get going. So all of these numbers are lies, all of them. I know the red one is not a lie because I know what I'm doing and what my community is doing. But I think a lot of the other lines are just lies. So there are a bunch of people out there who are just puffing up their numbers. And I think it's high time for me to do a bunch of things. One of them that we decided in the last few days is for me to go back to blogging. I'm sick and tired of people, stealing our ideas, rebranding them and presenting them as their own, and so on. So it's time for me to go back and say, hey, here it is from the horse's mouth. Here is the vision, and we've had enough of stuff where we invent things and other people then rename them and reservice them to the public. But the other thing that I want to do is actually call people out. It's high time. There's a lot of hope and dream peddling, and there's a lot of just straight up lies and fraud in this space. Speaking of which, we saw the SAM fraud, but there's also other fraud. There's fraud at the chain level. There are people who are injecting fake transactions for the purpose of manipulating various rankings. Chief among them are daily transaction counts. So if you see a chain that has inflexible transaction counts, daily usage, then you know it's fake, because we all know people come and go. Interest in this area went down in June. If somebody's monthly active users did not go down in June, they're a bunch of liars. And I'm not going to name names, but you know who you are, and I know what you do, and I think everybody else knows what you do as well. And so it's high time to actually document this properly. And I'm not going to name names now and whatever, start a firefight. But But I think there's a bunch of people out there who are just adding these numbers. The thing that we've never done is exactly that. All of our numbers are what they are. All of our measurements are what they are. They're documented properly. They can be repeated properly by anybody else who cares to repeat them. When it comes to the average daily transactions, there was a huge uptick on the Avalanche side, outpaced the peer group by quite a bit, and this is not the least bit surprising. I think we're going to be doing exactly what we've been doing all along, and you'll see these numbers go up even more with more subnets coming online. So Messari in particular, they try to do a good job, but this is such a gameable field that it's hard to stay abreast of what's going on. Some of these numbers are completely fake. If anybody gives you super high TPS, if anybody gives you super high and inflexible monthly active users, you know that they're in the business of making crap up. If anybody gives you huge numbers for NFT activity, these are all highly manipulated things in this space. So we'll call them out in the coming months. But all of the actors that you think, have you ever seen someone who used, system X? I'm not going to name X. I think it's maybe on this. There are two of them at least on this graph right now. I've never met one person who said I used it and I loved it, and yet somehow their monthly active users are supposed to be sky high. It's like, no. And then if you look at the transactions, they're all incredibly low value, and it's just part of a pattern. You look at the pattern, and from a technical perspective, it's not very difficult to identify this as a bunch of bots. It's too bad that the regulators are busy with the craziness of SBF and others. This is yet another source of abject fraud that we see in this space. And Phantom, I've never, whatever. I'll just stay there, stop there. So, in other news, more positive stuff. BTC.B just surpassed the amount of value the amount of Bitcoin on Avalanche, bridged Bitcoin on Avalanche is in excess of the amount of Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. So I think it's exactly as one would imagine. Lightning Network, I called out its limitations a while ago. They're fundamental to how that system is built. The Lightning Network creates an overlay graph on top of Bitcoin. And that graph is a person-to-person graph. I'm connected to Kevin. I trust him up to, I guess, 0.00001 Bitcoin level, no more. I'm connected to Luigi De Meo. I trust him with, 100 Bitcoins, etc. That, and Luigi in turn is connected to, connected to John Woo, etc., etc. And that creates a graph. And now I can route to John Woo over Luigi. That's what the Lightning Network does. And a lot of the complexity is about pathfinding. A lot of the complexity is about privacy, which they don't do a great job of at the moment. A lot of the complexity is about rebalancing those capacities on those edges, because if I constantly send money to Luigi, well, then that connection becomes skewed and it needs to be rebalanced. It gets very complicated. In contrast, Bitcoin on Avalanche can be sent from anyone to anyone else in one step, in less than a second, without any kind of pathfinding, route finding, etc. There is no capacity limit. If you hold it in your hand, you can send the full amount to your destination. So this is very different from the Lightning Network. As a payment network, this thing is better than LN. In addition, you can use the same BTC as collateral in DeFi. You can put it to work. You can borrow against it. So suppose, as I did, I needed some money recently. I just put in some coins into Aave and took out a loan. And I paid it back. In fact, and by the end, the cost of doing this operation was incredibly low because some of it is subsidized. So check this stuff out. It's really, really, really fun. And it's really, really exciting. I think this is the future of BTC. It's going to move. It starts out, it gets minted on the Bitcoin network. I don't think the Bitcoin community will ever let that be changed, and that's fine. The coins reside on the Bitcoin network, but then they get bridged in a manner where it's essentially self-directed without a custodian. So you take your coins from Bitcoin and you do this operation where you reuse the same private key on the Avalanche chain. So they go essentially from one address on the Bitcoin network to the same address on Avalanche, and now you've got your BTC.B. Is you're not transmitting it, so to speak. You're just carrying over the coins to the same address on another chain, where you only you hold the private key associated with that address. And then you can use your BTC.B. So this number is increasing. BTC is very valuable, and now it can be put to use into smart contracts in a seamless fashion. You can do this whole operation. You can take your BTC and borrow against it within, I would say, about 5 minutes. Most of that 5 minutes is just installing the Core wallet to do that bridging operation easily. You don't have to install Core. You could do it from the command line, but I suggest you don't do that. That's complicated and error prone. But if you get Core, it's super easy. You click, click, click. After installation is the hard part. That's 3 minutes. And then 2 minutes of clicking around will enable you to take your coins, put them into Aave, put them into any other DeFi that you like. Okay, now let's slow down a little bit. I've been doing this series called "This Is Why We Crypto." Every now and then, I'm reminded about why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing. Why it is that I stopped teaching at Cornell. It's not just because of the pandemic, but because the world needs to change. And I thought it's far more effective to hands-on change it than to write articles about how other people can build things, because other people end up not being able to build that many things, it turns out. So it's good to remind ourselves, especially in the aftermath of SBF, especially in the aftermath of a whole bunch of people looking critically into the crypto area, and a bunch of people gloating about the loss of asset value that we experienced, and saying, "Oh, hey, crypto is just it's just this, that, and the other," and to remind ourselves why we're here, why it is that what we're doing cannot be duplicated by others. Why it is that we bring something to the table that no one else has at the same table or on any other table. So this has been a long-running series. I think I talked to you about the Dole Fruit Company and Wall Street, how Wall Street lost track of the number of shares outstanding. I talked to you about the planes, the FAA system going down the other day. And just again, like every week, there is yet another reminder of why it is that we need these kinds of systems. We had a cyber attack that caused all derivatives trading to default to manual trading. Process that for a second. The year is 2023, and somehow some people sending a bunch of packets to a bunch of centralized servers causes those systems to be inoperable, unusable, such that suddenly traders have to resort to little sheets of paper in their hands, picking up the phone to market makers and saying, "Hey, I'd like to sell, I'd like to buy," etc. It's like I don't know what. It's like one of those black and white movies that they show on Christmas, right? All these salarymen with their suits on the stock exchange, the floor littered with buy orders and sell orders, market makers like pointing at various random people in the crowd. They were reenacting those days. These guys who are so high and mighty every now and then about, oh, crypto isn't mature yet, etc., etc. Well, your systems have been around for a gazillion years. How do you like it? Now that you have to just manually enter trades and keep track of your derivatives trading. So we know how to build Byzantine fault-tolerant systems, and they're so much better than centralized, custodial, centrally run systems of old days. All right, with that, I'm going to try to slow down, try to get my voice back, and to the extent that my voice allows, let's talk a little bit about where we are and what questions you might have. So I'm going to let's just jump into some questions that my team has identified here. What role do you see Avalanche subnets in as the world evolves beyond the EVM and explores other VMs? Oh, this is a great question. Going beyond account model into coinset model or UTXO-based VMs. Does AWM work between any virtual machine? Great question. So let me just answer the easy question first. Yes, AWM is warp messaging. It's essentially a way to collect. It's a way to collect a signature from a subnet. It's essentially a subnet collectively saying, that we as a group believe the following thing happened in our universe, in our dominion, in our chain. And then you can take that created certificate out to another chain, and it's a self-standing statement that you could use as the basis of, for example, invoking a smart contract on another chain. For example, Dexolot on its own subnet carries out a bunch of trades, and then it doesn't do this yet, but it will, because it's on their roadmap. But it could use Warp. When they were getting going, Warp was not available to them, so they end up building it differently, and now they're going to be switching to Warp. But so you use Dexolot to do a bunch of trades, you make some money, and at the end of the day, whenever you want to cash out, you use Warp messaging to create a certificate that says user me has so many coins, please release them to this address on the C chain. And you get that in your hand, you present that to the C chain smart contract, which then unveils, unlocks the coins and releases them to the user's address on the C chain. That's a very typical usage of Warp messaging. That could be done between any virtual machine. Warp is universal. It is not specific to the EVM. It could be used between any virtual machine. It was designed from the get-go to be universal. So it doesn't matter if Dexolot was written on an EVM in Solidity, which it is, but it could have been written on a different virtual machine. It could have been written in Rust. It could have been written in WASM. It could have been written in, I don't know whatever move, whatever you might want to do. And but the messaging from one subnet to the other is entirely independent. And for technical people among you, the only things that matter when constructing that message is having enough of stake. Say the statement, agree with the statement. And that all takes place via the information that's stored on the P chain. And that's already in a universally parsed format. This is why all the validators have to parse and validate the P chain. And so there isn't any difficulty or any VM specific thing to Warp messaging. It's fairly easy on the EVM. It's fairly easy with existing VMs that people have used. If you build your own, so it's not all that much more complicated, but you'll have to integrate with Warp a tiny bit. So what was the question again? So I answered the second question. Yes, AWM works between any pair of VMs. But the question was, what role do we see Avalanche and subnets play as the world evolves beyond the EVM? So this is a great question. We have already shown, I think by way of examples, that there are so many exciting virtual machines that you can build. We built one. I think it's called Spaces VM, was the very first one we built. Take a look. It's kind of like a social network. It's kind of like Twitter. You create your space, you claim it. Underneath your space, you could store your avatar, your connection information, your contact information, as well as any other data that you like. If you're an artist and you want to store content addressable NFT content, you could do that with Spaces VM. And the beautiful way in which that was done by Patrick O'Grady, who built this Spaces VM, is that the entirety of interactions with the Spaces VM is Ledger compatible, MetaMask compatible. So you could use, and of course it's core compatible. So you could use MetaMask to generate the transactions and then send them on to the Spaces VM. So, but underneath, there is no EVM. It's just an entirely different virtual machine, very specific to the purpose, very specific to that application. We're going to see more and more of these because some of these subnets do not need the complexity of the EVM. The EVM actually has a lot of attack vectors and a lot of complexity and also it's missing a bunch of the functionality you might need for different use cases. A storage VM, for example, would be a fantastic thing for people to build. And I would very much encourage, again, those of you who are listening who are technically oriented, to build a Filecoin competitor. It's not very hard at all to take especially if you want to do it in Rust. You can take our Rust SDK, build a Rust VM that has its own materials, own API, own interfaces for storing blocks and recalling them. And I'm hoping that in the year to come, I will find some time to do this, but as a hobby. But I think there's actually a business case to be done here. I think there are some storage VMs out there, storage systems out there. They're not doing that great a job, and there's so much more that could be done. And the pace at which they're moving forward is incredibly slow. So I think an energetic team could really shake up the whole space here. So in general, if you want to create a new VM, you're totally free to do so. All of the VMs can communicate with each other using Warp, and I very much expect that people will be generating new, exciting virtual machines for different specific tasks. So here's the next question. What is the most important problem that can be solved or improved using the Avalanche blockchain? This is an intriguing question, probably the most difficult question I've faced in a long time. Not only do I have to come up with important problems, I have to then pick up the most important one. So I don't think I'm going to have a satisfactory answer to this. I'm afraid I'm going to totally fail in public, right in front of your eyes right now. There are lots and lots of difficult problems that we face. And I think the right way to approach this is top down. So there are some really big issues facing humanity. So some of these are highly worthy of being addressed by smart people, and some of these are highly conducive to being solved by blockchains. So clearly, issues like climate change are huge and very, very important. And trustworthy systems for trading carbon credits, for example, are a huge thing that if done right, if done properly, they could actually change the planet that we leave to our children. So that's a very big problem. And I don't see this problem being solved by anybody yet. The systems for trading carbon credits are incredibly prone to abuse. The provenance of information related to carbon credits is not clear at all, and everybody who ever touches any of those systems comes back and says this thing is a whole bunch of lies, a whole bunch of schemes by which people are getting money for doing things that don't necessarily help the environment, and the exchanges, the traded systems are not open to the public. So if you and I wanted to buy some carbon credits to neutralize our plane travel, for example, it's actually incredibly hard. So that's one example. I'm not going to say that that's the most important problem right now, but I will say that is an important problem for humanity. I don't see it being solved by anybody. There are about 7 different semi-trustworthy exchanges where the carbon credits are somewhat vetted and blah, blah, blah. This space is just begging for disruption. It got built, it attracted a lot of scammers, and it's unclear if it's actually having a positive impact. It would be fantastic to bring in a crypto sensibility to this space. Get the provenance out. Allow crowds to vet claims about carbon sequestration, about carbon, changing carbon emissions. So that would be one of the top things that come to mind. But there are many others. There's financial inclusion, remittances. If you were to take away the Western Union $15 fee between every transaction from here to the Philippines, from here to sub-Saharan Africa, you will change some people's lives in a super tangible way. I just looked up the information on the remittances. The average overhead is, so the average size of a transaction is $200 to about $500. So people work for a month and then they send home $200 or $500. That's typically the range. And the fees they pay are on the order of 4%. On average, it's 4%. But for sub-Saharan Africa, it's much worse. It's about 8 or 9%. So there's a huge opportunity to reduce fees, to go from $10 and so forth down to fractions of a penny. I think at the moment, if you were to use the Avalanche C chain, which you don't have to, you could create your remittances subnet. But if you were to use the Avalanche C chain, it goes down from tens of dollars to a few cents. So the transmission part can be made incredibly cheap. There are still going to be other costs when at the transaction point, at the point of conversion. So, and then there's slippage costs and so forth. So whoever does this needs to do this carefully. I haven't seen any teams actually tackle it properly, and so they always try to shove an extra coin down your throat, and that's, I think, one of the main reasons that just completely subverts the entire effort. So these teams usually, and I can go on to this other rant. So there are a lot of people out there who will use a great cause and then turn it into something by which they sell you coins and disappear. And there's no shortage of that in the crypto space. But that problem is begging for some smart, dedicated, clean, crisp, trustworthy people to come in and say, look, we're going to actually solve this. You really don't have to pay $10 to send 100, okay, so, or 200. It's just ridiculous. The amount of fees are insane over there. So it's possible. And it would, the remittances volumes are in the many hundreds of billions. So take away the whatever it is, the 4% to 8%, and that much money will be in the hands of people who highly deserve it. It will change humanity. I'm not sure if this question is a technical question. So if I put on my geeky hat on, which I can never seem to take off, by the way, so I always have it on. Maybe perhaps the person is asking, what's the biggest technical problem we face as a blockchain community? I think, I can tell you that in the Avalanche community, I would love to see additional new virtual machines that perform different functionalities, like things that are not doable with what we have. Storage systems was one of them that I just got mentioned. That space is begging to be disrupted. It's just too slow, not much happening. But also, there are many other things that one could do. And one of the things that I decided just during the workshop in the last few days was to go back to blogging. And what I will try to do is identify these opportunities for projects. The things that I would do as a professor, the things that I would pursue as master's projects, I will simply just put out into the open, and I will try to help the people who pick them up. I will try to see that people in the Avalanche community take these ideas to completion. So I'll try to do that out in the public in the coming weeks, so hopefully that will address this question better. So on the fly, I came up with 3 things. So number 1 was climate change, carbon credit trading, etc. Number 2 was remittances. Number 3 was assuming that the question was about technical stuff, was about building new virtual machines that provide different functionality than what we are used to. So those 3 are exciting to me. There's much more to be done there. So hopefully we'll have an ongoing conversation through my blog, and we'll come up with new things as a community. So, or you could just be asinine and you could just go create a layer 2. Last thing the world needs is another layer 2. That's just don't do that. It's just, those are all of them are centralized pieces of garbage, and none of them live up to, there are coins out there that don't live up to crypto standards. They're just centralized pieces of crap. I'm not going to name them, but just bring up the top 50 coins and look down the list. You'll see a bunch of them, and we often, like, everybody sees them on the list. Some of them are ranked fairly high. Everybody sees them, and our eyes just gloss over them. And layer 2s are in the same way for me. I just see a layer 2. I say, hey, do you have fraud proofs? No. Okay. Are you decentralized? Is the sequencer decentralized? No. Well, then you're at a different table. You're not at the same table as me. So you're running a different operation. I know you're using my language, but you really aren't at my table. So anyhow, let's move on. Next question. What's my secret to working very long hours without getting tired or bored? I have no idea. This is, this is a great question. I have no idea what my secret is. I just was always able to just kind of sit and do the same damn thing for long hours. And when I was a kid, I used to rock as well. So I worry a little bit about, the sort of the where I am on that spectrum over there. But no, I think it's just passion. So you really got to believe in what you're doing. You really got to have that urgency. I always had that urgency, and the urgency comes from within. It comes from an understanding that people are going one way. This is typically my process. People are going one way, and it's clearly the wrong way. I know this happens to many of you as well. Like, you look at it and you're like, everyone's doing something. It's the easy thing to do. And then bright people are coming in and they're making that thing incrementally better, but it's going in the wrong direction. And then you, if you were to do things correctly, you can see that, hey, this could be done so much better. And so then you have to just go in that other direction and do it better. Of course, you're alone, and there's like a gazillion of the other types. So you kind of have to work extra hard. It's just, it's not supplements. It's not, meditation. I don't wake up at 2 a.m. and start my day by doing a cleanse and meditate and this and that. I don't do any of those things. I try to avoid meta thoughts. I try not to think about what I'm going to do. I just do stuff. I find that the more I think about doing things, the more meta I get, the more that meta then substitutes for the real thing. And in my mind, I feel like I did stuff, even though I didn't actually do any progress on the actual task at hand. I thought about doing things, but didn't actually do the things that needed to be done. So I generally don't do meta stuff. I'm not a very deliberative person. I just kind of go in and do things. So I try to get stuff done. And I there's nothing that makes me happier than sitting down for long periods of time and doing the same thing. I don't manage to do that as often these days as I used to. So I get interrupted a lot. But I've also made some changes to how I work these days so that I have more uninterrupted chunks of time. I have also trained the people around me, this is another thing, to expect that I will be dedicating myself. I'll be just cut off from the world for, 14 hours a day. And then, I emerge a few times to eat a little bit, and then we get done. And they expect that I will be doing that for some time, and then I take time off. Oh, and I should mention, I work in sprints. So was never, I was always the thin, sickly kid. I was never a marathon runner. I was never an endurance athlete. I sprint. So I sprint, get stuff done fast, and then I call it done, and take a break, and I sprint again. At least that's how I was. As a grad student, it worked beautifully well. As I started managing more and more projects, then I went from one sprint to another sprint to another sprint. So it's a little tougher on me, but it's been going okay. What's the next question? Will C-chain fees decline as the amount of Avax burned increases and presumably increases in value? Yes, but in a very circumspect way. There is nothing about the amount of Avax burned that impacts the fees. The fees are simply impacted by how much demand there is for the blockchain at that moment in time. If there is something happening, then the fees will spike up. If there's nothing happening, then they will go back down to their default levels. The thing that does cause the fees to go down in general, the thing that will cause the fees to go down as we move forward, is simply the fact that the underlying technology is getting cheaper in terms of hardware, and it's in terms of software, it's getting optimized. So there are lots and lots of new software releases that we push out. I think we pushed one out yesterday. Banff 8 went out the day before, not yesterday. I think it went out the night before. So we just did a release. That release contains a bunch of optimizations. It makes the client work so much more effectively with the same amount of CPU. So suddenly we can do more work per unit time. And that's what causes the fees to go down. So you will see, for example, in the year ahead that we'll be releasing some gigantic new components inside the client that revamp how the client works. I'm not going to release any more alpha other than that, but we're going to be changing it in a drastic fashion. And as we do that, you will see that, hey, this thing that used to run with so much overhead, it required so much CPU, suddenly needs far less CPU, far less beefy machines, etc., etc. So that's the process that as we move forward is going to be causing the fees to go down. Over time, let me just remind everyone, I am speaking from a position of relative authority. There are lots and lots of people out there. There are lots and lots of technical people, or people who like to pretend that they're technical. I do have the track record to say all this stuff, unlike I think most other people. Just a lot of other people. So we have a track record of those of you who've been around, you know that the Avalanche C chain fees at some point did spike up, and there were consistently high fees. And I said, stay put. We will come up with changes that will actually change that. And we changed a whole bunch of things. We introduced optimizations that caused the fees to drop drastically. So I know what I'm talking about. Then I said, look, you guys are, on occasion, the aggregate load is still high, sustained high, because there's demand for this space. These subnets will shed off the biggest components of this intransigent demand for space. And as games move out to their own subnets, fees will go down. And I delivered on that as well. So I think that's just in the last year and a half that, I called it. I said it will happen. It's just like science. And that's what science allows us to do. We make predictions that are based on facts and incontrovertible axioms. And then you get delivery. So that's exactly what we did. There aren't that many people in crypto who can say that. So, and once again, I'm telling you that this will happen with the C chain fees going down as we introduce optimizations. So let's see. There are some projects using distributed validator technology that couple of validators making cluster to validate network. Guys, the English here is a little odd. Okay, do you think validator cluster necessary for network? Yes. I'm not sure what the question is here. Yes. Every network consists of a set of validators. Every chain needs a set of validators. If I'm understanding the question, I think this is asking, does every network need to be distributed? Maybe that's the question. Perhaps the question here is, are there uses for blockchains that are fully centralized? And I think the short answer is no. It's stupid. There are fully centralized chains out there, and some of them in the top 20. They are used. So, for example, if you want to, I'll just name names now. It's just getting late in the day. My voice is going. So, people, when they want to send some money from one exchange to another, they might go over the Tron network. As far as I understand it, the Tron network is entirely centralized. And I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, don't come at me. Maybe Tron is more worthy than I think it is. But as far as I understand it, the entirety of that network could run out of Justin Sun's laptop. And so if you trust Justin Sun's laptop, then you could keep your assets there and send them from one exchange to another momentarily. What people do is they don't keep their assets there because they don't trust Justin Sun's laptop. But for that brief instant when they're sending money from one location to another, they're like, okay, well, Justin Sun's network has a bunch of liquidity and it's fast, so they use it. So that's okay. They could do that. So that's one example of a fully centralized system. It does have a blockchain associated with it, so you can see what's happened. You've got the transparency going on there, but you're not really getting any of the benefits of decentralization from that system. And the people who are using it aren't there because of decentralization. So going forward, what do I expect? I think that people will understand. Oh, let me give you another example. I mean, I don't want to name names now, but there still is a coin ranked above us whose value proposition was never decentralization. Their value proposition is, hey, there are some metrics and we do whatever we can to get high numbers on these metrics, right? And there's a guy at an exchange who really props up our value. That was the value proposition. And the chain stops every now and then, et cetera, et cetera. So people used it, and I don't think anybody who went there for the idea that, hey, I believe in blockchains, I believe in decentralization, I believe in building a different kind of a financial system, I believe in building different kinds of social services, et cetera, on a blockchain. So they just went there for essentially the value proposition that came from this one guy doing this Ponzitronic thing. And then when the Ponzitronic thing collapses, you've got a lot of heart-wrenching stories left, right, and center. So going back, the world is a way of teaching everyone the value of decentralization. I think the SAM failure was really instrumental. It made people realize, hey, I shouldn't invest just because there's some kid out there who says he's rich, et cetera, et cetera. And I shouldn't get into this technology because, there's somebody behind the scenes that will do X, Y, Z for me. That's never the value proposition. For these systems to be valuable, there has to always be a decentralized core that carries out the function as planned and as predicted. So I think if the question is, is there any value to centralized blockchains? My answer is there are people who see such value. Time and time again, they're proven wrong. And so somebody will lose a few $1 billion to Justin's son's laptop as they do a transfer and something terrible happens. And then after that, they'll learn their lesson. Until they, maybe, or not, who knows? Until then, of course, there are systems that are decentralized that provide the same performance characteristics as Justin's son's laptop. Maybe not exactly the same, but fairly comparable. So you can send substantial sums of money from one exchange to another in the blink of an eye, faster, I believe, on Avalanche than on Tron. So that's the right way to do it. You won't be bitten by the inevitable collapse of the laptop or the centralized network. Okay, let's see. Can I say something about Avalanche's roadmap? I have to say something about Avalanche's roadmap. I promised you guys a roadmap, and the thing that I promised you guys was this: in the first few months of this year, we will make our roadmap public. I'm running a little bit behind. This Davos trip set me back a little bit, but we will make a roadmap public. I have never been a fan of roadmaps. I'm never a fan of dangling a vision, dangling like crazy stuff. I'm never a fan of being obstructive, never a fan of selling people a whole bunch of crazy moon math that may or may not come to fruition. So I always shied away from making promises of future things to come. But people do need to understand, I think as a community, we need to understand what it is that people want to work on. As a community, we have to come to social consensus about what it is that we would like to see. So to that end, I want to put together, and I think I need to put together because I promised you guys, I need to put together what I see as priorities for Avalabs to be working on and what we will be bringing to the fore. I leaked a lot of it, at least the short-term vision, in these discussions and also in conversations with founders and so forth. But I think it should all be public. So expect that to happen shortly. That's one of the top items on my to-do list. There's a lot of travel coming up again, of course, but I will do my best to get the roadmap out in public. At the same time as making the roadmap public, we will also be changing the way we do development of the core platform. So a lot more of it will happen in public. There's also going to be an Avalanche improvements proposal process by which anybody can submit code easily. I mean, they can do that through GitHub right now, but we will make it far more open, far more easy, and we will proselytize and be a lot more supportive, I think, for people to participate in that process. The reason for this is very simple. The platform has matured to a level where I think it makes sense to be able to work with a wider base of developers. So until now, we were moving so fast that it was just logistically impossible for external teams to participate. But now it's a lot easier. And of course, if you're building on top of us, you could always do that at your pace. You never needed any permission. It was always open source. And if you want to build your own VM, you always could, et cetera, et cetera. So those things are not changing. It's just the things that we do internally at Ava Labs will be even more inclusive on. Okay, last question. Please mention to tune in next time because Dexolot will be your next guest on the All Access podcast. Yes, I should mention this. I've been wanting to bring on the Dexolot folks on the next podcast. They've been doing some revolutionary work, and I can't wait to have them on here. to have them talk about what it means to have dual chain dApps, and why dual chain dApps are superior to regular way of doing business, and how we can build new services that are far cheaper, far more secure, and far more resilient than what people are used to. So that's a good note to end on. Tune in next time. Hear me talk to the Dexolot folks about what they've built. And in the meantime, I am super excited. My voice is gone, of course, because I've been speaking nonstop for a couple of days, planning what we're going to be doing for the remainder of for the next 6 months. It's very hard to plan in this space for more than that. And there's so much exciting stuff in the pipeline, as always, but especially now. So I think the SPF situation and sort of the craziness that we lived through caused everybody to take a step back and to slow down their launches. And those launches are now going to start going out. You just saw 2 of them, Dexolot and Intane. And there's many, many more coming. Lots and lots of exciting dApps coming. Lots of exciting new capabilities. I think Warp came out of nowhere for most people. We've been working on it for many, many, many months. I lost track of how long that's been. And that was in keeping with our ethos here. We'll make that more open. And so, but I think where we are now, technologically, is a very nice, very well consolidated situation. We have the world's best technology. We're building multiple chains in parallel. Those chains are supremely flexible. They're designed from the get-go to be compliant. They're designed from the get-go for digitizing the world's assets. And on top of this, we have a core experience. The wallet makes the differences between these chains imperceptible. It's so easy to switch from one to the other, or to perform operations on one in the background while you see another one in the foreground. So it's just a beautiful experience overall. The bridges are fantastic, I think. They're super cheap. And, there's a lot of people on crypto Twitter talking about bridges are insecure, etc. Yeah, bridges are insecure if you guys build them. So, the Avalanche bridges are super cheap, and they've been working flawlessly. They've been bringing BTC.B over to us, and that's an asset that is unequaled anywhere else. So I can go on like this. And of course, now let's not forget the Enclave effort. We introduced the notion of fully encrypted exchanges. So CEXs, CEXs, DEXs, and there's also FEXs. So fully encrypted exchanges. I think I had David Wells on this podcast a few months ago, but there's also exciting developments on the Enclave side, making that even more general. So lots of exciting new things coming out in the Avalanche world. I can't wait to talk to you about them as they come out. And with that, I think I will stop here. I will step outside, see how cold it is, and I will get ready tonight to travel to the Starkware conference. If any of you are going there, you might see me there. And in general, I'm super excited to deliver on the promises I made to you, and also on the roadmap that we have that I will be sharing with you shortly. Thank you so much for your time. Take care. Have a great weekend.